He quit Sydney, moved to Beijing, and is fresh out of the Shanghai track. F1 journalist Reilly Sullivan shares his insights about living in China, from the ritzy media centre to cheap eats, where to stay, and why the Chinese Grand Prix should be on your travel list. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Away We Go podcast.
Are you ready?
It's lights out and away we go.
Let's do it.
Welcome back to Away We Go podcast, a Formula One podcast that goes beyond the track limits to include travel and lifestyle surrounding the sport. My name's Diane Bortoletto, and today I'm in Margaret River. And I'm delighted to welcome back to the show Reilly Sullivan, a Formula One journalist who, since he's been on the show, has relocated to China. And we've just had the Chinese Grand Prix in Shanghai. So happy to have you here, Reilly. Welcome back.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've relocated. I'm in China and loving it, and just back from the Shanghai Grand Prix.
Oh, fabulous. So tell us about your experience moving to China to start with. Like how, why, when, how did you end up in China from Sydney?
Yeah, so basically what happened was towards the end of last year, I saw a job ad and it was an English channel, but in China. So it's at a Chinese channel, but for English speakers. And I thought, that'd be a cool one to get. And it's sort of the dream working overseas, I think, as a journalist and being able to kind of explore. So I applied for it. And then as anyone who maybe has worked in China before, like there's a lot of paperwork and things take a long time to kind of get in motion. You have so many hoops to jump through and then it all comes together, and then I moved. I'm definitely loving it. And even from a motorsport point of view, continuing to do that, it's been great because there is a lot of motorsport stuff here. We have the F1, Formula E. There's going to be 2 rounds of that this year in China. The FIA awards are going to be in China. It's kind of a banner year for motorsport over here.
Fantastic. Wow. And do you speak Cantonese, or is it Cantonese and
Mandarin? Yeah.
Mandarin? Oh my God.
Yeah. I don't. I'm learning. I've started to take some sort of basic lessons, and luckily through my job, which is fantastic, they've arranged for us to have some lessons. I don't know if I'll be writing in Chinese anytime soon, but definitely anytime you sort of move to a new country, it's great when you're able to talk and engage with people a little bit more organically than just using the apps. But I will say these AI voice apps now, they're so powerful in terms of translating. Someone came over to repair something in the apartment, and it was like they just whipped out their phone, they just explained it, and it just did a translation for me. It was pretty cool.
Oh, that's wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
But at the same time, while that technology is fantastic, yeah, I'm like you. I think, you want to try and learn the language a little bit, not just be relying on speaking into a device when you're trying to have a human connection with someone. So, good on you. It's exciting. And so you're based in Beijing. So how far is that from Shanghai, and how different is that from Shanghai?
Yeah, so obviously Beijing being the capital of China, it really is kind of the center point of the country, literally. Politically, not as much economically actually, but definitely politically. So I think when expats come here, they say Beijing is very much, if you want a very Chinese experience. I think Shanghai is a little bit more international, has that more of a foreign influence perhaps. It is a little bit different. So I think for expats that come to Beijing, it's very much, you have to kind of, which is, good anyway to do, you blend in and you want to make an effort and I guess embrace that Chinese culture. Whereas I think in Shanghai, perhaps you can be a little bit more Western, or it is just a little bit of a different vibe.
And do you get a lot of attention in Beijing? Do you stand out there, or are there loads of expats there?
In Beijing, there's not a lot of expats. Obviously, all the embassies here and those kinds of organizations are here. So there's a lot of you don't meet business expats, but you meet a lot of people that are attachés, or, they're involved in diplomacy. That's very common, especially in this area. I'm kind of in the sort of CBD area of Beijing. I pretty much blend in. I don't think I stand out really, which is kind of nice. I must say, I think people here are fantastic with the language barrier. I've been really impressed by how much people are patient with me and willing to work with me. They're very patient, I must say.
That's so good. I lived in Rome for 6 months and I spoke a little bit of Italian before I went there. I could not write in it an article or a media release or anything like that in Italian. Well, it was not at that level and still isn't. What I found the hardest then was just expressing myself, trying to have conversations. And then by the time in my head I've translated what I want to say, especially in a group conversation, like they're 3 topics down the road from where I am.
Delay, a little bit of a delay.
And as an adult, you don't really get that opportunity to feel vulnerable too many times, I suppose. But when you're put in a situation like that, when you're in a brand new place, a brand new culture, especially if you don't really know many people there, which I didn't, you've got your work colleagues, I suppose, which is a little different. It gives you a whole new appreciation for people that immigrate, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And vulnerability, that's a really interesting way to put it, because it is kind of like, you know, when you're in a new country, in a new city, you just sort of thrown into it and you have to sink or swim. And I think some people struggle. Like, I think I have days where I'm like, oh, like I'm just, you know, I'm longing for just that easy communication and familiarity. But at the same time, there's something kind of magical about, you know, being somewhere new. And even though the world today is very small and we're so connected, I don't know if it's just China, maybe it is quite different culturally, but it feels like this whole new world has opened up.
That's awesome. I did read a really great quote once that said, when you hear somebody with an accent, what you're hearing is bravery. And I thought that was a really good way of putting it, because it does take bravery to pick yourself up and put yourself somewhere new in a new situation like you have. Hats off to you, Reilly. I think it's great. So you've just been to the Shanghai Grand Prix. So tell us, what was that process like of, you know, getting a media pass? Was it the same that you went through in Australia? And what was the media centre like over there? And yeah, just talk us through some of the behind the scenes as a journalist.
This is my 4th or 5th kind of race weekend as a journalist. So basically, the accreditation process, it's the same. So I applied to the FIA. I write for a couple magazines, so mostly in Australia, FHM. So I work for them every month. And then so I sent through some of the work I've done, all of that kind of information. I have what they call race by race accreditation. So some of the journalists you'll see in the paddock, the kind of full-timers that are at Sky Sports or, you know, sort of the main sporting websites, they have what's called permanent pass. So they get it at the start of the season and they can kind of come and go. And then for me, it's more, and for I guess a lot of other journalists, it's race by race. So each time there's a race weekend that you're interested in covering as a journalist, you sort of apply and it's a yes or no each time.
And what was the media centre like, the media pen and that kind of setup? Was it the same as Australia, better than Australia, like different? How was it?
The media centre is operated by the Grand Prix operator themselves, if that makes sense, but also with the guidance of the FIA and standards. So they are a little bit different. Like, say, the Singapore paddock and the Singapore media centre, I would say is on the smaller side. Like, it's a bit more condensed because that paddock is quite condensed. The Melbourne one is quite similar to the Singapore one, but this one in Shanghai, because it's a little bit of the history of the circuit as well. The Shanghai circuit was really a showpiece that was custom built for the F1 when China was given the race back in 2004, I think. It was basically like, all right, we're going to build this amazing circuit. And part of that was all the facilities there are top notch. So the media center is huge. Usually the media center is kind of directly above the pit lane. But this time in Shanghai, I don't know if you've seen it on TV. You know how like at this end, either end of the Shanghai Strait, they have those big Heineken signs?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are like about 10 floors up, and that's the media center. So one end is the media center and one end is something else. But so you have an actual bird's eye view over the straight, whereas when you're above the pit lane, you kind of just have a bit more restricted view at one end, if that makes sense. It was a huge media center. The square footage of it was massive. It was great. They had little, I think I can say it's like little gift bags from the circuit with just some little, like, just really, like, it was all top notch. Like, there was lovely food. I was really impressed. I would say it was the ritziest media center I've been to.
Oh, fancy pants. That sounds great. And in the lead up to the race, you interviewed the Chinese driver, Zhou Guanyu. You've interviewed him before. Is that right?
I've interviewed him 4 times. This was the 4th time.
Wow. Okay, right. How did you go? So he's the reserve driver for Cadillac?
Cadillac. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Gosh. Got that right. A reserve driver for Cadillac. What was your interview about with him this time? And who was it for?
I'm working here in China for a Chinese news channel, as I said. And so when I got here, I kind of thought, oh, wow, like I wonder if I can combine my two things that I love, right? Like I love motorsport. I love being here in China. And Joe is the superstar of motorsport in China. He's done so much to open up the sport as China's first Formula One driver, but also he's just a great person, a great role model. And so I was like, oh, like I wonder if there would be scope to chat to him. Obviously, Cadillac's a new team. I hadn't, done anything with their press team before. So I reached out, and as I said, I have interviewed Joe before when he was at Sauber a few times, kind of back to back. It was sort of a short period at the end of 2024 where I interviewed him in Singapore and on Zoom, and then again in Qatar. So I had a little bit of history with him, and I thought I'll just reach out and see what they say. And it just sort of came together really organically. It was actually during the Bahrain test, so only about a month ago, but obviously the world has changed a lot since then. Yeah.
Yeah, it sure has. You said to me before we jumped on to record that you spoke to Joe about traveling and Shanghai. Like, what sort of things did he share with you?
Joe's great. Like he's a reserve driver, and obviously a reserve driver is just that. They're there in case the main two drivers are unwell, or if there's an emergency. They're also working on the sim. But for Joe, I think a big part of his role, especially for Shanghai, is he's kind of like an ambassador. Like he's a roaming ambassador for Cadillac, for F1 in the country. He was doing all these events and appearances, and it's also his hometown. He's born and raised in Shanghai. So we talked a little bit about that. What do you kind of have on your list? Like, what do you think people should do when they come to Shanghai? Of course, the big change this year, which we saw a little bit, was there's all these new visa policies with China. Basically, in the past, even for a tourist visa, for a lot of countries, it was kind of a old-fashioned process. You had to get a physical visa in your passport to come to China. Now, a lot of Western countries, it's visa-free. So you can come to China now for 30 days, visa-free, process on arrival, and that is really, I think, opened up, China a lot more to visitors. So I think for Shanghai, I think all of a sudden, when Aussies and maybe people in Europe and North America are looking for a race, they're like, well, hang on, China's now visa-free. It is, I think, one of the cheaper races. It's definitely a lot of value for money. So I think it just opened it up. So when I was talking to Joe, I said, what do you recommend people do? He said, first and foremost, everyone in China, payment systems, everything's on your phone now. It's all through WeChat and Alipay, and they're very sort of high tech in that way. So he said, definitely, you just need a phone. That was his first piece of advice. Have everything on your phone set up. And he said, you can get a bit of everything. He said, there's great shopping. He really likes the shopping. Joe's a very stylish guy. He's all about sneakers and fashion, and he likes coming back here for the fashion and doing all the shopping. And the food, he also recommended the food.
And what are some of the typical dishes that you would eat in Shanghai?
We didn't talk specifically about food. I mean, I think the food in Shanghai, it's international. So you have your kind of regional dishes, but then I also think it is a real international city that has that kind of flavor of China. For example, in the media center, it was beautiful, like rices and seafood as well, actually, really good seafood. You definitely get a blend in Shanghai. Yeah, and there was a lot of Heineken flowing. Not in the media center, but at the race. I was just going to say, because it's one of the Heineken sponsored races, it was like Heineken on tap in the paddock.
That sounds fun. And what would be some of the top things for travellers to do outside of the racetrack in Shanghai?
With Shanghai, it's a permanent circuit, so it's a little bit further away. It's in an area called Jiading, which is sort of to the north-ish of Shanghai. It's about an hour in the car from, say, downtown to the circuit. Because you're racing during the day, everything's kind of wrapped up by 5 p.m. So if you're going over to Shanghai, I think definitely try and do all the 3 days, go along in the day, have your day at the races, and then it really comes alive at nighttime. That's when all the skyscrapers light up. You have that whole experience. Shops are open really late in China. You can browse in the mall at 9, 10 p.m. at night. That's very standard here. In terms of activities, another one that they're pushing, funnily enough, is Disney's a sponsor. They have a Disneyland here in Shanghai, and Disney is now an F1 sponsor. So it was pretty funny when I was in the paddock. You're always sort of looking for celebrities, and like honestly, the biggest celebrity was Minnie Mouse.
I did see Mickey Mouse on the broadcast a couple of times.
Yeah.
But, oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Did you get to Disneyland or not?
No, I didn't go to Disneyland. I think as well in Shanghai, the other iconic thing, which I think you have to do, is go to the Bund, which is sort of the promenade area along the river on one side, you have all the futuristic skyscrapers, and then on the other side, it's all of this amazing colonial era architecture along the Bund. And that is really what Shanghai is famous for. And I've heard that the FIA Awards are going to be in Shanghai in December, and they're going to be on that promenade. So they're going to be doing something really special.
Oh, cool. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
There you go, folks. You heard it here first. So maybe book your
Yeah.
ticket for Shanghai in December. Yeah, it's interesting that they've opened up the visas for visitors. It just seems that COVID is a long distant memory now for visitors and for travel to China. So getting around Shanghai, like, did you stay in downtown or did you stay by the circuit? And what's the public transport like, or a taxi cheap? Like, how does it all work?
I made it kind of a judgment call. I decided, all right, I'd like to be closer to the circuit, just because when I was in Qatar, I went to the Qatar race a couple years ago. And I recall that it was a similar thing where the circuit was quite far from Doha, like it's in Lusail. So it was quite a drive. And I just remember the drive, and I remember thinking, oh, like I'd rather be closer to the action and the circuit. And then if I have time afterwards, I can take a taxi or a train and go into town. So I opted to stay relatively close in Jardine. I mean, there was still, it kind of worked. So basically, I was just relying on Didi, which is sort of
Uber.
very affordable, very cheap, and especially coming from Australia. But it was still a lot of walking, because basically I'm like, great, I'll grab a Didi, they'll zoom along and then they'll drop me off. But obviously the controls are kind of in place around traffic controls. So they stopped me about halfway anyway. And then I had to leg it for quite a while, especially on the first day. And then I kind of got my bearings. I wouldn't say necessarily that you have to stay near the circuit, because I do think that public transport's great. There's a really cool subway station that actually stops. I think it's called International Circuit Station. There is a subway station at the circuit, and it's a really cool design. It's actually a circular, it looks like a racetrack, the station. I love those details. I would say definitely pick somewhere downtown. You're going out during the day for the racing, and then in the evening, I think it's better to come back and be in the city. Another thing that I was really impressed by was the prices of the hotels. I stayed in a sort of 4-star-ish hotel, and it was very affordable. It was much, much cheaper than, say, trying to stay in Singapore on Grand Prix weekend, which can get very pricey very quickly.
Speaking of costs, if you were going out for a cheap eat in Shanghai, what kind of prices are you looking at for a bowl of something, or just a cheap eat, like the equivalent of getting a kebab here, for example?
$10, $20. I mean, it's great. You can really do it low, high, there is that range with food, but you can certainly get, a bowl of noodles for $5.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. And you want to do that. I think if you're going to China, it's like going to Italy, right? It's all about the food. You want to be kind of enjoying the food. Yeah.
I think when you go to places like that, exactly, Italy, France, Spain, China, Japan, where food is intrinsic with their culture, as it is with many cultures, but that's a big part of the whole travel experience, isn't it? It's just eating what the locals eat, eating where the locals eat, going to markets, eating the traditional dishes. So Didi's easy to get around and cheap.
Yeah.
There's
Super
trains and a metro system, which sounds pretty straightforward and efficient. So getting out of Shanghai, if you were going there for the race and you wanted to spend 3 or 4 days somewhere else experiencing another part of China, where would you recommend, or did Joe Gwen you suggest any places where people could go and have a different kind of experience outside the city?
Well, for me personally, I commuted down from Beijing. So it's about very similar to kind of Sydney, Melbourne. It's about 2 hours-ish flight, Beijing, Shanghai. But the great thing with China is the high-speed rail. I flew down for the race. When I went back, I took the train. The train was about 4.5 hours, high-speed train. But
Oh, wow.
yeah, but the great thing is you don't have to go to the airport. You don't have to go check in and be there hours early. I got to the station, I thought for a second, I was like, am I going to miss this train? Because traffic, and I left the hotel a bit late. You just sort of quickly go through when you jump on the train, and you can get there 20 minutes before. So I think the high-speed rail has totally opened up the country. If you're going to Shanghai, I think it's a great base. There's a lot of beautiful cities. Suzhou, which is almost like a kind of Venice-style city with canals. That's all very close handy to Shanghai. But even Beijing, 4.5 hours on the train, 2-hour flight, I think that'd be a great one. And another thing as well with China is that there is like that connectivity where even if you're coming in one way, like there's multiple big airports. It's not like you have to get back to Shanghai to fly out. Like you could fly into Shanghai, do the race, and then you could move the show on to the next city and then fly back. So like the connectivity of it, I think is really great for visitors. And not to sort of beat a dead horse, but yeah, just the value for money. I was just couldn't fault it. And especially with Formula One, tickets and everything, it can very quickly become an expensive exercise
Totally.
for racing fans. And it was so refreshing to be at a race where it was just that little bit more affordable and accessible. And I feel it's a bit undiscovered maybe, because I do think when I talk to Aussies, everyone says, oh, Albert Park and Singapore. But I think Shanghai, it's right there, guys.
Yeah, definitely. And I think now that the situation in China, it's open, things have really settled down. It feels safe. It feels accessible from an Australian perspective. Yeah, definitely. You're living in Beijing. Like, are you paying rent? Like, what was your rent in Sydney and what's your rent in Beijing?
In terms of cost of living in China, it is much lower. My rent is now less than half than what I was paying in Sydney.
Wow.
Yeah, it's significantly cheaper. The other thing as well is delivery and all of those kinds of extras that add up, right? Like when you're ordering Uber Eats and things like that. Like here, food delivery is very cheap because eating out is cheaper. There's this sort of weird thing at the moment. I don't know how sustainable this is, but basically there's so much competition with food delivery apps that it's just like a race to the bottom in terms of price. It's often cheaper now to say order your coffee than to actually go and get it. So the merchant might charge 30 RMB, but if you order it on the delivery app with a coupon, it's 20, including the delivery. So there's a weird thing at the moment where oftentimes buying and ordering it online is cheaper than physically going there, even though in theory there's more labor involved.
Yeah, totally.
So I haven't quite worked that one out, how that works, but that's been my experience. And in terms of other costs, like it is a lot cheaper, and things are quite subsidized as well. Like electricity, for example, is very cheap in China. Like utility bills are very low. Heating is subsidized. I don't want to seem like I'm like super pro, but yeah, like it is very different. For example, especially utilities, we've just come out of the end of winter. So heating in apartment buildings is generally centralized. So you don't turn it on or off. You don't get a bill for it. It's just turned on. It's heated.
It's there. Yeah, right. And then earnings then. So, I mean, I guess it's all relative. Are
Yes.
you earning a similar wage to what you were in Sydney, or is that lower as well because everything is cheaper?
I mean, honestly, I've been very lucky in the job that I have, and also other little things on the side. I'm financially better off here. So in terms of
Awesome.
salary, so
Yeah.
it definitely works that way. I mean, there is downsides, obviously, moving away from family and being like, I love Australia.
course.
Like it's different to be. So there's always upsides and downsides, but from a financial point of view, it's definitely
Oh,
it's
good.
it's been good. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Oh, that's good to hear. So if somebody were traveling to go to the Chinese Grand Prix next year, like
Yeah.
when they're planning their trip, how long would you suggest that they stay in China for to have a bit of a holiday? How long would they need in Beijing to immerse themselves in the city? And I know it's a loaded question, how long's a piece of string, but
Right.
what
Yeah.
would you suggest?
I've been to Grand Prix where like I've flown in for the race and then you left the day up. You know what I mean? And you don't you're there for the race and that's fun, but you don't necessarily get much else. So I would say definitely try and do a week at least. 2 weeks would be great. I think 2 weeks would be enough to enjoy Shanghai, enjoy the full race weekend. Also get to see a couple other places. But you could do it longer. Like I've met people here that, especially now with these sort of newer visas, they come here for, months at a time. They go on the train and they really kind of traverse it because it's such a huge country geographically, much like when people road trip it around America. I think a lot of people are doing that here, but it seems like instead of like an RV, they're doing it on the train.
Yeah, right. So is the whole country
Yeah.
serviced by train travel? Like, is it easy to get anywhere in China by train?
Yeah, mostly. So there's the old-fashioned trains, which are a lot slower. That infrastructure has been around forever. But the high-speed trains now, the connectivity really does reach across. I believe it goes all the way to Xinjiang region and Tibet, which is the far west. So essentially you can go east, west, north, south on a high-speed train. And again, the prices for the high-speed trains are higher than the slower trains, but they're still very reasonable. Like I believe to get back from Shanghai to Beijing, obviously it's like an airline ticket, like the pricing kind of goes up and down, but I want to say it was less than $100. I think it's just a great value for money trip.
And what's been like a surprising thing about China for you? You moved there at the end of last year, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
November.
So, So what surprised you about living in China?
The biggest surprise, I think, is the pace of technological development. It's been surprising because there's a lot of things that are automated in China or they're completely digitized. And that is kind of mind-blowing. Like, I mean, I have been to China before, and I guess maybe because I had been like a few years ago, you see the pace of change. That's certainly been one. Even it's not just like payment systems are digitized. It's like, my apartment building, for example, I don't have a key. It's like I have a fob technically to open the gate, but to access the building, it's actually a Face ID.
Yeah, right.
And to open the door, it's just a code. They've really cut out a lot of physical things like even IDs and passports. Like face scanning, for example, is very normalized here. Obviously, it wouldn't necessarily be like that in Australia for a myriad of reasons. But yeah, like here, it's just they just do it differently. And I fully credit and respect that, it's their way and their style. And I think that they are doing things in a different way. I think a big lesson is it's not always a question of, comparing China to the West or, better or worse. Like I think it's just a different approach. And I think it's important that to see it, and to learn and not to give opinions. I'm a very opinionated person by nature. And I think another big learning has just been listening a bit more.
You're right. It's just accepting that's the way things are in that place. And
Yeah.
doesn't matter whether you like it or hate it, you're not going to change it because it is what it is. So you just have to learn to live with it. It's funny when you were talking about getting into your apartment, because a lot of hotels now around the world, you don't have keys. You have like a card normally that you tap on your door. But I stayed in a hotel in Sydney last month where I had a physical key, like it was an old school key with like a ornate, and I had to put like it wasn't at hip level, it was at shoulder level.
Another funny one in China is with the hotels, including when I was staying in Shanghai, there's a lot of robots. Like there's a lot of people will order things, or like maybe they'll have something at the front desk that they need taken to their room, and they have these kind of little automated robot things that talk, which will come along, pick it up and take it up in the lift. So sometimes you're sharing the lift with a robot.
Yeah, there's a few of those robot waiters around different Asian restaurants around the place here in Australia, but I can imagine that they would be next level and more prolific there in China. Oh, how interesting. Did Zhou Guanyu, when you were interviewing him, did he share anything surprising with you, or did anything he say make you go, make you stop and think?
Absolutely. As I said earlier, the last time I'd spoken to him was 2024. So he was leaving Sauber. It was at the end of the season. Last year, he had the stint at Ferrari as reserve. This year, Cadillac as reserve. So he's in a different headspace now and a different stage. And I felt from talking to him that he had digested that first stint of his career at Sauber, like the 3 seasons. And he talked about how different Ferrari was, the contrasts of different teams. And I found that one of the most interesting things he said was just the gratitude he had actually for not only his time at Ferrari and his time at Sauber and now Cadillac, but also the people. Valtteri Bottas, for example, who was his teammate at Sauber. He had really wonderful things to say about Valtteri as a teammate, which you don't always hear that. There's rivalries and it's hard. There's, I'm hesitant to, put too much emphasis on it. But yeah, he really spoke, I thought, refreshingly about the honesty that he had with Valtteri. And then now I guess they're back together working at Cadillac. And I thought that was really telling because I was also thinking in Shanghai, looking at George Russell and Kimi or Lewis, when they were sitting there together. And you think it feels at the moment there's so much respect between teammates. And it seems like those like really intense rivalries of the past. Like I'm sure they're still there below the surface, but especially in Shanghai, there was a very wholesome feeling of just support amongst the drivers for each other. And I just thought that was really refreshing because there is a lot going on in the world. And the fact that people can have something fun like Formula One to look forward to and have these drivers sitting up there and getting along, it's just really heartwarming. And you just think, I love this sport.
Yeah, totally. And I said in the last episode, the result of the Chinese Grand Prix with Kimi Antonelli getting his first podium, George Russell, his teammate, finishing in second, and Lewis getting his first podium for Ferrari. He was in Kimi's seat 2 years ago. It just felt like a really happy ending to a story. That's what the podium felt like. And look, I'm sure those rivalries are there. Maybe not between those three in particular, but definitely between Max and George, for example, and between Liam Lawson and Checo, for example. As fans, I do love the rivalries as much as I love the community and the respect that the drivers have for each other. Like, one thing about surfing, the World Surf League, is when you see all the surfers interviewed, they're always like, oh, he surfed such a great heat and full respect to him. And I'm like, come on, you wanted to beat him. Show us some, be real. It feels so diplomatic sometimes that it almost feels fake, if that makes any sense. In China, at the Shanghai Grand Prix, it felt wholesome and it felt genuine and it was lovely. Like, I was bawling my eyes out watching the end of the race. It was fantastic. So I just hope that the genuineness and the honesty remains and that it doesn't become so diplomatic. And full credit to him, and it was great, and he was just faster than me today. And we want to see some fire. Like, we want to see some competition sometimes as well. New era of Formula One. What's your take on it so far? We've only had 2 races, but what's your opinion?
I guess initially, I think, like a lot of people after Melbourne, I think we were all kind of like, well, how's this going to work? Because you've got the biggest names in the sport, Max Verstappen, not happy. They're not happy with, I guess, the split with the conserving the battery and all. They weren't enjoying the racing. And I'm like, well, how's this going to go? I felt after Shanghai, it was better racing. And I think that made everyone kind of go, okay, like there is going to be some good racing going on. Personally, I think that the racing has been good. I mean, there's good overtaking. I still think that Formula One is Formula One. I don't think that it's at risk of, losing its fire or its excitement. Another thing as well is that I remember people talking about, oh, it's like Formula E and it's like, firstly, like, I don't like the snobbery because I also think Formula E is also really cool, like a really good racing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not an either or. Like, I felt initially hesitant, but I do think that it seems to be slowly normalizing, and it seems to be that the drivers are getting more used to it. Aston Martin is still, I don't know what's going on over there. That seems quite dire, maybe existential, honestly, because I don't know what's going to happen. So there's that. But then look at some of these other surprise winners. Look at Alpine.
I know, right?
Where they're back. It's been refreshing to sort of see that it has shifted for better or worse. It's moved things along. Like, where's Papaya? Like, it's all just sort of changed. But what do you think?
Look, I know there's a lot of old school Formula One fans out there and they just want to see the V10s back on the track, but my opinion is that Formula One is at the cutting edge of engineering and technology. And this is where it's at the moment. Whether Max Verstappen likes it or not, whether Lewis Hamilton likes it or not, that's where it is. And if manufacturers can't bring that technology into producing road cars, they're not going to be involved in the sport. And without manufacturers, there's going to be a whole lot less money in Formula One, a whole lot less development and being at the forefront of cutting edge technology, which is what I think makes Formula One so exciting. Now, if the racing's boring, I'd be the first to say, this is rubbish, we've got to change it. But the racing has been exciting, but especially the first, 15 or the first third of both the Grand Prix and the sprint race. I was on the edge of my seat, screaming at the TV, whether they're lifting and coasting and recharging batteries or whether they're using boost mode or whether active aero. That's something that I know what it is, the active aero, but it's not controlled by the drivers. So I'm in my head, I'm like, how does that work? When does the driver know if it's going to come on and they're going to feel a difference in the car? Anyway, but yes, as long as it's exciting, I'm all for it. And so far, I'm all for it. And I know that Max is really unhappy about it. And he did speak up a couple of years ago when they were developing these regulations, voicing his concerns. But you know what? Lewis Hamilton was really unhappy with the last era of car, you know?
Yes.
So I just feel like you're not going to keep all the people happy all the time, ever, in anything. And it's got to evolve. It's got to move forward. It's got to be relevant to the motor vehicle manufacturing future. And I think that's where it's at. I like it.
Actually, it's such a good point. Nothing is static in Formula One in terms of technology. And I think even though there are these things that they hold on to, these traditions, the infrastructure and the technology is constantly in motion and changing. And I think, as you said, like it reflects the times that we're in, and it has a halo effect on road cars. It has to be of its moment. Yeah, that's such a good point.
Whether I just feel like that, if people want to stay with the V10s, well then go to the Monaco Historic Grand Prix. It's on in April actually, and it would be a really good one to go to.
Yeah.
But Formula One has always been at the cutting edge, and I think that's where it belongs.
Absolutely.
All right, so who's your hot take for world champion this year after 2 races?
Honestly, Kimi Antonelli. I mean, wouldn't that be amazing? Like, I think George as well. I mean, George and Kimi, but then I've noticed there's something careful about when George is saying we're making hay now, because, he knows that throughout the season, obviously people will start to catch up and there could be a lot to happen. So I don't think it's as open and shut as like, oh, George, Kimi, but I still think at this stage, yes. And I think it would be great to have a new world champion and some new names coming in. I mean, I know Lando has only won one, but
that's enough.
Think about all those years. Obviously, we had the Lewis era and the Max era.
Yeah.
And like it's nice to have more names coming in, and I think it's healthy for Formula One.
Yeah, definitely healthy for the competition and interest in the sport as well. So many fans tuned in and out, like during Lewis's reign and during even Michael Schumacher's reign, because it's like, oh, well, he's in front. We know what's going to happen. He's going to win. There's no point really watching the race. This competition and the fact that, like you said, the Alpines are looking competitive. Yeah. Ferrari's back finally, and it's not all McLaren and Red Bull anymore. I think Formula One fans are in for an exciting season, except in April when there's no racing at all.
Yeah, that was another one. I managed to talk very, very quickly to Nico Hulkenberg in the paddock. I asked, I'm like, how are you feeling about having a month off? And he said he's very philosophical. He's had one of the longest careers of the current drivers on the grid. And he's raced through pandemics, regulation changes, teams falling apart. Like, he's sort of lived and seen through it all. And he just said, basically, sometimes there are things bigger than our sport and we have to step aside. And he said, safety comes first. I think that seems to be the attitude. And I really respect that as well, that I'm sure it is annoying and frustrating to have to take off time from your job and the things you love to do. But sometimes there is things bigger than Formula One, shockingly.
I think that's a really intelligent and mature response from Nico about that. And in my mind, it would be irresponsible for Formula One to go ahead. I think they made the right call. Well, Reilly, is there anything else you would like to talk about or add?
No, but thank you so much for having me back on the show. I'm such a fan of this podcast, and I'm so excited to see it continue to grow.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'd love to hear your thoughts about this season and how you're finding it so far. And you're allowed to disagree with us in a respectful way. I'm all for it. If you want to hear more about Reilly and his career and how he got into Formula One, you can listen about that when we had a chat in episode 44. And he was also back on the podcast in episode 48. So if you've liked what you listen to, please rate and subscribe to this podcast. Hello, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and turn your notifications on so you know when there's a new episode that's dropped. Thank you so much, Reilly. It's been a real pleasure having you back on the podcast. Until next week, and until lights out.
It's lights out and away we go.
Away We Go podcast is produced by Diane Bortoletto.